What's up, guys? Tambo here with your weekly core report. It's a big week for Run Pure members across both NBA and NFL. Let's get into the winners. In the NBA streets, Hole 800 turned $12 into 4K. C. Corms turned $76 into 4K as well. Leroy hit for $4,600, while Y Guy 223 shipped for $12,000. Our guy AP joined in the fun, hitting for $8,000. Turning to NFL, it was another great week for us, especially when it came to Showdown. I parlayed my appearance on our premium Thursday night Print Factory show into 61K, featuring a lineup with Dallas Goedert in the captain spot. RPS coordinators were all over the Goedert captain play, appearing not only in my premium attack plan, but Mangone pushed it as well, helping Nadesify ship for over 67K, while Pete Vegas hit for $7,200 over on FanDuel. But the biggest hit came on Monday Night Showdown, where RPS content was all over Kenyon Drake in the captain spot. Captain Drake was pushed on our free Showdown show by special guest Chris Randone, in addition to our Talking Touchdown show with Spread, Tyler, and Title, where Tyler called his shot, nailing the Drake call ahead of shipping $29,000 for himself.
75% of carries, like he's going to be unowned, like low owned because of his price. He's got to be even more low owned as a captain because his price jumps even more. If he scores 2 touchdowns in this one, you could be golden.
Guys, if you have not subscribed to our free YouTube channel, take a second right now and get it done. Racer 1A joined in with a 10K hit from Showdown. Kanoski 69 hit for 22K as well. Locks rode Drake Captain to a 30K score to continue his heater, while I shipped 2 more King of the Beach seats. But the biggest win was by Run Pure member Homebrew, who hit the perfect unique lineup, solo shipping for a monster $500,000. He joined our NFL First Look show to talk about his big night.
Randone just mentioned at the end of the show, the very end, it was the last lineup I made. It was the end of the show, and he said, Kenyon Drake, captain. And I was like, well, I don't have one of those. Let me make one of those.
Congrats again to all our members. If you want to be featured in the core report, drop your winning lineup in the Members Never Win channel in our premium Discord. If you're not a member, join now. You won't find a better value with all sports included for one low price. And while you're watching, hit that like button right now. Remember, if you're not winning with us, you're watching us win. Until next time, let's keep running pure.
It's the Monday print edition here at Run Pure Sports, and we already have our first loser of the day in chat. Gucci shirt for Randone, minus 125. Thumbs down, bitches. That is not what he's doing. Hit the like, hit the subscribe on your way in. I'm JT Hayes, as always. I'm joined by a larger panel than usual because we have someone in our coordinator group, fantastic new member, who is coming out, identifying themselves as a Washington Commanders fan. We're all very, very proud of Megan Schaup. And listen, this team, Ron Rivera, Dan Snyder, whatever the hell went on with the cheerleaders, Megan, that doesn't matter. Welcome to the Print Factory. How are you doing today?
Well, look, thank you so much for having me. Listen, I've always not been shy about being a Washington fan. So, you know, I wear it like a badge of honor, even though it's a tough life to live. So, I am here to give some Washington contrarian takes, and yeah, that's hopefully it can help. Think of some ways to go about it from that side. So
excellent. We look forward to that when we get into these games. We've got our guy who is not wearing a Gucci shirt. He is Chris Randone, C-Dome. How are you doing on this lovely Monday? You were talking before we came on about shipping Millie Makers, striking out Big T. You're in a good mood, got the good mood mojo flowing. What's going on, Chris?
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Nice to have Megan here as well. You don't really get to talk to too many Commanders fans, so
you don't.
I'm curious. I'm curious about this show now and these contrarian takes for sure. But no, we got some good mojo going. Almost shipped the Millie Maker yesterday. I'm very disheartened about that, but hopefully we can ship it tonight and let's get some winners going for sure.
Yeah, that was great yesterday. Tough slate with the pricing, and as always, it comes down to top wide receivers top running backs, guys that other people weren't playing. Big T, how's your Monday going?
Always good when I get to come on and see you guys on a Monday. So we're right back at it. Is it back to a milli tonight, or has it always been milli on Mondays? I get confused with these showdowns. 500, so it's still good. You're not going to be disappointed tonight when we ship the old 500 out of the gate. A lot of chatter on Twitter today about I love these days where the DK shifts the MMA format, where not everyone plays MMA, but forever, like if there'd be a missed fight or something, someone would faint on the way, you'd get canceled, you'd be screwed after a lock. So DK listens after they complain forever. People complained every time, and now everyone complains that they made an adjustment like usual. All the sharps have a even bigger advantage, and the casuals, like, believe me, the casuals don't want a 0 in their lineup, no matter what you guys think. Do I agree that the sharps definitely have a bigger edge with late swap? Absolutely. But as far as the actual game environment, casuals definitely don't want a 0 in their lineup. So it's an interesting topic.
Nobody wants a 0 in their lineup, but it is funny because for at least since COVID, when I think maybe a little bit before that, MMA started to get popular on DFS, and with the fights being canceled at the last minute, that's all you would see on fight night would be, oh my God, I had this guy. And now they react and they fix it and they correct it so that if a fight is canceled, you can make a switch. And of course, you have people on there. I saw one tweet on there. Good to see DK ruining their MMA product. I mean, Twitter is amazing because there's a lot of people that get on there and all they do is just bitch and moan no matter what it is. And it's probably the same people that were arguing for this change for the last couple of years that are now, oh my God, I can't believe they did it.
Yeah, it's definitely a funny topic to me because, yeah, I mean, I agree. The edge is definitely bigger for the limited number of people that are going to be on there, rerun it after each fight. If they hit an optimal, then they'll make it more chalky. The stuff they'll do, the sharp people, they'll do it for sure. But 99% of the people out there are going to be happy when their guy gets scratched. They can go in there and make a change and not get 0. I think people are like too focused on EV, and it's the sharpest people. It's the same thing we talk. It's kind of why I brought it up, because it goes into the showdown format where these guys are just so certain that they know what's best, and you got to leave money on the table, and you can't have any duplicates. And all casuals don't think about that shit. Like, it just doesn't happen. Casuals want to have fun. They want to have a sweat. They want to gamble. They want to have a chance to win. You know what? They're probably going to lose, JT. They probably are. It's the truth. Every one of you out there, 95% of you are probably going to lose. It's the truth of the matter. But you're not doing it for a living. Almost all of you. You're doing it to have fun. You're doing it as a form of entertainment. And you know what's not entertaining? Getting a damn 0 because your guy freaking whatever slipped on the way to the ring and didn't fight. Your whole night's over. You got no chance. I'll sacrifice a little because I'm in the same boat, really. I'm going to be at more of a disadvantage against those guys that are going to just do the same thing in NBA. They're going to sit and they're going to run the numbers all night long. They're not going to get laid. And it is what it is, but I'm okay with that. I'm fine with it. Everything doesn't need to be optimal.
They are not going to get laid, says Big T.
Yeah.
I like to hear the slander. And I'll tell you what, you talk about entertainment, and all apologies to the Commanders fan in the booth here, but this is a game tonight that without DFS, I would have zero interest in watching. We have the Commanders going into Philadelphia, 43.5 total. Implied total on the Philly side is 27.25. We've got some injury news here for Washington. J.D. McKissick is out, as are linebackers Cole Holcomb and David Mayo. Chase Young, of course, remains out. On the Philly side, just a couple of quarterbacks, Josh Jobe and Avante Maddox are out. Meg, I'll start with you because you are the one that watches this team probably more closely than either of the rest of us here.
Right.
Washington with Taylor Heineke, they are 2-1 since he's taken over under the helm after the injury to Carson Wentz. He has thrown a pick in every one of those games, and he's gotten sacked 6 times. What are you seeing here as they go into Philadelphia to take on the undefeated Eagles for the second time this year?
Sure. I'm not going to sit here and be totally delusional and say, Washington upset or anything like that, even though I'd love to think that I am. But I am going to try to point out some things that could be like storylines, because I think those, could be ways that you could build your showdown lineup. I listened to a good podcast last night by John Kine, who's the ESPN Washington writer, and he said one of the biggest keys are establishing the run. I don't think they're going to be able to necessarily do that successfully with Brian Robinson. I do ultimately think it's going to be Antonio Gibson who's going to have to get the checkdowns and get involved. So that's number one. He thinks they're going to have to try to get McLaurin involved early. He's the heart and soul of this team. However, again, I don't know that they're going to be able to successfully do that either. And then, of course, protect Heineke. Well, that's going to be difficult too. But the nice thing about Heineke is he can scramble. Wentz took, I believe, 9 sacks when they met in week 3. And he just was waiting for plays to develop. They weren't, and 9 sacks. Heineke can move. He can get out of, he's kind of just a scrappy little guy, plays like backyard football. And, so he may be able to scramble, may be able to get you some rushing yards. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, of course, contain Jalen Hurts. That's going to be difficult as well. But I will say we have 3 first rounders, even without Chase Young playing tonight. And those 3 first rounders have stepped up. We actually should have won. I say we, but Washington should have won last week against Minnesota. They had them on the ropes. And then Heineke threw a horrible interception that set up a go-ahead touchdown. The defense put them in a position to win. The defense has been playing much, much better of late. And it's because of those 3 first rounders on the defensive line. So those are all just things to keep in mind. Again, I'm not telling you to go like 5-1 Washington here. These are just some storylines that I'm keeping in mind when I'm thinking of being more contrarian, in certain types of builds.
Guys, hit the like button. Once we get to 500 likes, I'll stop asking about it. It's very simple. We get to 500, I don't mention it again. How about that? A little bit of an agreement. Chris, Cedome, Megan mentions the run. Philadelphia 30th DVOA against the rush over the last 4 games, and 27th in particular against passes out of the backfield. What are you looking at overall in this game? Do you think that the Commanders can take down the Eagles to give them their first loss in the season? I will point out, these division games have been closer. Megan mentioned the Washington defense, a lot of ugly, low-scoring games. In the first meeting between these 2 teams, Washington fell to Philadelphia 24-8. Do you see a similar outcome here, or do you think that somehow Taylor Heineke can rush and scramble his way to a surprise victory?
I do like Megan's take on Antonio Gibson. I think that he's going to be an intricate part tonight. When it comes to the rushing game, though, Brian Robinson, he's just really ineffective. He hasn't been efficient yet. 3.3 yards per carry on the season. And not only that, he's not really involved in the passing game. I think people think he is a pass catcher. And at Alabama, he only was kind of involved in some passing schemes late in the season because of injuries, right? So for me, when I look at the 2, I'd rather have Antonio Gibson all day, pass catching back. He played in that kind of system out of Memphis where, opposing side, Kenneth Gainwell went to Memphis as well. Their offense at Memphis was circulated around, pass catching backs. And these 2 kind of, are similar in regards to that. So Antonio Gibson is way more efficient and effective in the passing game. I think tonight they don't have a shot, this Commanders team. No disrespect to Megan, no disrespect to the Commanders fans, but I'm just going to keep it real. This Eagles team is also coming off 10, 11 days rest from a game at Houston. And before that, they had a bye week too. So this team is not only well rested, but they have preparation. They're at home under the lights. They got a lot of things going for them. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's just way too much offensive firepower for this Eagles team in regards tonight. So when it comes to overall, I like the Eagles tonight in a smash spot. We'll get into this game a little bit more, but yeah, I mean, coming from what Megan was talking about, Antonio Gibson, a lot of upside there. He continues to show up more in optimal lineups. If anyone saw earlier in the chat on Discord, I kind of shared some numbers in regards to tonight. He is a great leverage play if you want to play him in the captain, but he also is leverage as well if you have more exposure to him in the flex compared to the field. So he is someone that will, get into a little bit more, but I think Gibson tonight might actually be a lock given how I think the game is going to go.
So we've got a couple of people in chat who definitely haven't hit the like button yet. We'd hate to see that. So we would like to see that. We've got Tyler in here talking about spread and his serial killer side coming out on a show this morning. That's something that's concerning and troubling, but we'll get into that on the Wishbone Pod later in the week. And then Big T, AP, he made a call. He made a call on this game. He had a nice day yesterday. The Chiefs were on the slate, but I saw some of his lineups, and I was very impressed at the restraint that he showed. Probably helped out by the salary cap a little bit, but AP has called the Commanders' money line. He said, take it right now. Are you in alignment? What are your overall thoughts on this game? Philly, an 11-point favorite at home, 11.5.
Yeah. First of all, AP had a great call last week too with the Jets over the Bills. I even laughed at him a little bit in my head when I heard him say it. I think it was on your Sunday show where
It was.
He picked them outright too, and I respect that. I like takes. I don't like the boring, just get in there, say the obvious stuff. That's why C-Dome's crushed on the few shows he's done for Showdown this year. He's always got good takes. Love that. And yeah, I mean, I would like to be on board with that. And honestly, in my head, I wanted to say I like the Commanders, and then I dove in as I was getting ready for the show, just looking at a few things, looking at the scores. I just don't think I can get there. I want to because it's a division game Monday night. You would think in your head it just plays close, but once you actually sit down and kind of look at the matchups and the different strengths, like Washington's D-line is definitely good, but what's that going to do? That's going to force Hurts out of the pocket a little more, which might actually be better for Philly, in my opinion, getting them out moving, getting those receivers moving. I think it might just be a bad matchup, just kind of looking at the different spots the Eagles have had. I know their schedule's been terrible, and just looking at similar home spots, though. They played the Vikings, who have only lost once, and they won 24-7 at home. They played the Jags, who have been a pretty surprising team, solid, just middle of the pack. Beat them 29-21 at home. They beat a good Cowboys team 26-17, pounded the Steelers, who I think might be slightly underrated for their record, and the road games are a little different, but at home with extra time off, I don't know. I struggle to get to the Commanders side tonight, even though I want to. I feel like it's the better path showdown wise, just because it's cleaner, but sometimes cleaner isn't the winner. Or I mean, I said that backwards, but people know what I mean. I don't know. I think I'm more on the Eagles side, even though I want the other way.
So we'll get into this because, like you said, there's a lot of different moving pieces on both teams. Lots of running backs, particularly on the Philadelphia side. You've got a plethora of receivers. Washington even has a couple of extra tight ends that they'll roll into the mix. Let's start with quarterback. Make it easy for you, C-Dome. Jalen Hurts projected to be 60% owned overall, about 17-18% in the captain slot right now. What are you doing with him? Are you going to have any Heineke? And if so, where are your leanings here in terms of Jalen Hurts at captain or just in the flex?
Yeah, I mean, Hurts is by far, that he's going to be the highest owned player, right? Now, it just comes down to, do you have to run him in captain? And I think the question is right now, based on from what I'm seeing, he doesn't garner as much positive leverage as quite a few other guys. And so the question is, okay, well, if you put him in the flex, he actually gives you a little bit more leverage in the flex compared to the captain, which makes me want to kind of pivot to that and find some other ways where we can get, kind of different. That's what takes down these tournaments. But we also have to look at Hurts's kind of games, right? He's only hit 30 points twice on the season. So 2 out of 8 games, okay, that's fine. 25%, he's hit 30 points. That gives us a reason why, okay, now we can maybe see where else we can go. And also too, between him and Sanders has gotten 14 carries inside the 10, Hurts 13. Sanders has scored more rushing touchdowns inside the 10. So the question you got to ask yourself is, okay, can we, obviously have, we're not going to, I'm not fading Jalen Hurts. It's just impossible, right? Too much upside, especially with the feet. There's no way. But you have to ask yourself, if you don't put him in captain, what do you do in order to make yourself different and give yourself leverage? So I think, for me, Hurts is a lock regardless. Will I put him in captain? Absolutely. I'm going to put him there because of that rushing upside, because he's multidimensional, but I do like him more in the flex tonight. And then on the other side with Heineke, this is a little bit difficult, but at the end of the day though, 15, 23, and 14 in his 3 games, he's going to throw probably upwards of 40 times tonight, I think, because I think they play from behind. It's very difficult for me in this situation to look at these two teams and see where all the offensive production comes from on the Commanders side in order to keep up. Now, Big T did say, they came into the season a PFF grade of the number 2 defensive line, right? Now, if Chase Young would have played tonight, I think that would have been somewhat interesting. But with the linebackers out, that kind of is, kind of makes me off a little bit more. However, though, it's hard to say, okay, if you think Heinicke is going to get 12 to 15 fantasy points tonight, is that optimal? Right now, the numbers say that he is a negative correlation in regards to leverage against the field. So I probably will be under in regards to ownership to Heinicke. Yes, he does have some playmaking ability with his legs, but I just think this is a really difficult spot tonight for the Commanders. And I don't really see much upside outside of maybe Gibson and McLaurin's going to have a difficult time with Slay. I mean, this is going to be a difficult matchup. So I'm not sure as far as the offensive production. I'm not too keen on this Commanders side, but Hurts, like we talked about before, he's a lock for me regardless.
Megan, the Washington Commanders are 5th worst in the NFL defending the deep ball. A lot of people talking about Devonta Smith here, but A.J. Brown just had a breakout game a couple of weeks ago. I think he's in play here. The run has been very difficult to come by against these Washington Commanders. So in terms of quarterback, though, where are you looking at and your favorite receivers to pair with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, for quarterback, I think Chris broke it down perfectly. With Jalen Hurts, of course, I'm going to handle it like in smaller field, single entry type stuff. He's going to be my captain, and in larger field stuff, he's not going to be, he'll be in the flex. And I will do 1 or 2 lineups. And I was thinking about it before I'll plug another show on Run Pure. I was thinking about it before I listened to the Talking Touchdowns, but Title mentioned Miles Sanders, captain, fade Jalen Hurts. It sounds nuts, but in a Millie Maker, these are the kind of things that can work, but you got to tell the story. Miles Sanders scores a couple of touchdowns. Maybe you have a kicker because they're stalling out the Phillies kicker because they're stalling out a couple of times, something like that. So again, that's how I'm handling Hurts. Heinicke, I want to point out I could see him going either way, honestly, because you have to think from a narrative standpoint, if he were to somehow upset the, undefeated Eagles or even come close, I think he could potentially keep this job another week or 2. Wentz is healing up and could be coming back soon. But if he loses and stinks tonight, it's back to Wentz immediately. So, he's got a lot to play for. Does that motivate him, or does he, pull Kirk Cousins and just, totally crap out on prime time? So it could go either way. And so I'm going to kind of play 2 different scripts for Heinicke, somewhere I think he plays his guts out. He always says he models his game after Brett Favre, and he, plays like it's his last game every time. So I'm going to play some like that, and some where he's, freaking out that he's playing for his job and does terrible. So I'm going to play it 2 different ways in that regard. One point I want to make about the Eagles receivers, I get the case for Devonta Smith. He went off the first game against us in week 3. However, a beat reporter, John Keim, I mentioned earlier, tweeted something that I thought was super interesting. The Eagles have attempted just 19 passes of 20 air yards or more this season. That's 30th in the NFL. That kind of leans more to Devonta Smith. However, they are tied for 4th with 5 touchdowns on those throws. So, they get there a lot when they throw them. They just don't go. They do more of that intermediate passing. And so for that reason, I tend to like A.J. Brown, Goddard more than I do Devonta Smith. But again, Devonta Smith went off the last time he played us. So, a case can be made for all, but I am keeping that in mind. And I will say one other thing about the Eagles pass catchers. Hurts doesn't typically bring a lot with him. Now, in a showdown, if you're building a Philly, 5-1 smash, go ahead and load up, 2 pass catchers, but he typically only brings 1 pass catcher with him as far as like a big game. Last week it was Goddard, 2 weeks ago it was AJ Brown, but it does oscillate. So just be careful about that. I wouldn't be loading like 2 to 3 stacked with Hurts. That's something to keep in mind too.
AJ Brown with a couple of deep catches in that game when he went nuclear against Pittsburgh. As far as we know, there's no primetime narrative yet involving Taylor Heinicke. Big T, we'll bring it back to you. Megan mentions Talking Touchdowns with Spread. You guys all should check that out. A fantastic new show by Run Pure's resident murderer, Spread Astaire. Big T, thoughts on Jalen Hurts, Taylor Heinicke, how you're handling them tonight, and then we'll stick with you and get into this very crowded running back field.
Yeah, Hurts follows us into kind of the Josh Allen territory, Lamar Jackson. On these showdowns, they've been 90+% owned, counting captain, obviously, 90% owned, and they're just tough to get away from. I mean, because it in showdown, it is more of a floor type thing too, and especially in the utility where the minute these guys get like 15 points, I kind of said this last night on the show too, but if they get 15 plus, they have a pretty good chance at being in the winner, even in the flex, unless it's just a total shootout where just everyone goes crazy, which I don't think anyone really sees that happening tonight, where it's just tons of guys. Because even tonight, say it does shoot out and stays close, it's still a limited number of guys, I think, that could go off even in that scenario. So Jalen Hurts is very simple for me. Just pop him in there. Whether he's in the captain or not, that's just depends on the rest of your roster construction. But in theory, if I liked Washington, I would be more on the utility side, flex side of him. And if I think Philly blew him out, I'd be more on maybe captain side. But either way, he's going to be super high owned. You're not going to really win or lose tonight based on Jalen Hurts. It's going to be how you deploy the rest of your team. As far as Heineke, we've seen this spot a lot this year on Showdown. You got the Daltons, the Jacobys, these guys that aren't that high owned for a quarterback. We keep seeing it every single week. It comes up. These guys end up like 25% owned. I know most of the sites right now say 30s. It just keeps happening. I'm telling you, they just keep coming in lower owned. And when you can get a quarterback in Showdown 20 to 25, sometimes even lower on FanDuel because there's one less spot. I mean, that Dalton week, he was 15% in the freaking on FanDuel. Like in Showdown, the quarterbacks, I don't care who they are just the most likely, obviously. I mean, what if on the main slate you could play multiple quarterbacks? We'd all do it, right? Of course we would. But on Showdown, the game theory has expanded so much that people think the correct way, which always was like receivers and these guys have more upside, so naturally they're not playing quarterbacks. And in the beginning, quarterbacks were super high owned, but it's kind of flipped a little bit with these guys. Yeah, everyone plays Jalen Hurts. Obviously, he's got massive floor, massive ceiling. But when it gets to Heineke, I just think he ends up lower owned than he should be, and that makes me want to play him. And it makes it easier for me on the Washington side. I'll go into running backs. Like I said, I like Philly, and I just can't see playing Gibson. Robinson, I definitely can't play. He's more of a guy I want to play from ahead. If I thought Washington would win, I'd like him. I know he's only 5,400, but I just can't click the button. I won't have him. He won't be that high owned, but I won't have him either. And Gibson, I don't mind him, but 6,800 in a game that I don't like Washington that much, I don't really like him either that much. So if you start looking down the list, you really don't have that many guys that you guys already talked, and we'll get to receiver in a second, but McLaurin's got a tough matchup. Even Dotson on the outside, I think these guys just have tough matchups, which leads me back to Heineke again, being lower owned. I trust his floor. I think he does have a ceiling because of rushing. I don't know. Granted, like if you told me he's 50% owned, I would definitely fade him. I'm with you guys that I don't love the spot. I do love the ownership, though, for a quarterback. So mark me in for both quarterbacks. Running backs, though, I think I'm going back to my roots in Showdown. I definitely don't like the Washington guys. And as far as the Philly side, there's a lot of dudes. Miles Sanders is fine, but at 9,800, do I want to play A.J. Brown or him? I'll take A.J. Do I want to play Devontae or him? I'll take Devontae. Do I want to play Goddard or him? Goddard shipped for old Nades and Tambo last week or the week before in Showdown. I'll take Goddard. So Sanders gets moved down the list. And honestly, Kenneth Gainwell looked pretty good last time. He's only half price of Miles Sanders even. So I'm going to be more on the Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott at 1,600 route off of I can't pay 9,800 for Miles Sanders. I'll just say it. So I'm off the three. I mean, there's no way I'm paying 9,800 for that. There's just no chance. So that's where I'm at with running backs.
Miles Sanders needs almost the best of best worlds to get there because you've got Jalen Hurts. So he's got to do something crazy like break off a long run, fall into the touchdown a couple of times, which is hard to expect at that price.
I got one last point before you lead it in. So just because I think it goes together. So you got Heineke at 9K, Miles Sanders at 9,800. Miles Sanders is going to be higher owned than Heineke. Anyone that wants action, I will gladly take Heineke over. I mean, there's just how could you play Miles Sanders over Heineke, a quarterback, playing from behind the whole game? I just don't get it, I guess. So maybe someone can help me with that.
All right, well, go ahead, chat. Get in there and tell Big T what you're willing to wager on Heineke versus Miles Sanders. C-Dome, let's follow it on. Let's keep going with you and the running back position.
I mean, he's not wrong about Sanders. You know, when you look at the difference in kind of the efficiency of the defense, they struggle more on the passing side of things, right? On the rushing side of things, I mean, I think they've only given up like 4 touchdowns total this year on the ground, and 2 of those were to Derrick Henry in one game. So the scoring opportunities there as far as the rushing side are very limited compared to what we can do on the passing side. I think Dallas Goedert really grades out well tonight for being very optimal. If he can find that connection throughout the game, and he does what he did against Houston, I think there's a tremendous upside there. But we'll get into that. So I honestly think tonight, believe it or not, is a Miles Sanders fade night. I know that might sound crazy, but the truth is that he's also due for some regression. I mean, this guy's had 5 touchdowns in his last 5 games, 3 straight with a rushing touchdown. However, though, I think tonight they win through the air. I really do. And I think Gainwell's interesting. I think if you see a scenario, and this is like more of the game 3 that we usually talk about, but let's just say Sanders does struggle. Let's say he fumbles and Gainwell comes in now. And Gainwell, we've seen, he has little bits of bursts of speed here and there. But Gainwell also is the pass catching back, right? He has that playmaking ability. I don't mind that call. I think Boston Scott's dust. I just think he's complete trash. And I think, I get it. He's very cheap tonight, and, maybe we can fit him in and he can get one of those plays. We haven't seen one of those plays all year. And I don't think I want to gamble tonight on that, especially if I'm trying to maximize my opportunity. But the Miles Sanders fade talk is super interesting. And if we can be on the right side of that, and, as far as half the field are rostering him, and let's just say we fade some in lineups, I think that could be very optimal as well. And I'm just basing that off what we've seen with the D line, right? When it comes to yards per carry, they're in the top 7 as far as the fewest yards per carry on the ground. And then when it comes to yards given up, I mean, they're like top 10 rushing defense. So maybe there is some truth here tonight with the Miles Sanders fade. Don't mind it whatsoever. However, I do disagree to some extent with Big T with Antonio Gibson. I do think that if this does become a game where we see the passing attack, Heineke turns one over, now they're down 2 touchdowns, now they're down 17. Brian Robinson becomes irrelevant at this point, right? He hasn't been efficient on the ground already as it is. Philly's D is very good. No disrespect to Brian Robinson, but this is just not the matchup for him. And this fits the role more for Antonio Gibson. And when we have a pass catching back that does get a ton of targets, listen, he's going to get 4 or 5 targets minimum tonight. He might even get 10 plus rushing yards. This is not about the type of player he is. They don't like him, but unfortunately, he's actually somewhat good. And he's actually efficient when he gets the ball. So I like the fact of the usage tonight that can potentially go to him. And so Gibson's going to be a no-brainer for me tonight. Like, I really, really like Gibson. I think he has to be involved within this offense in order to make Washington somewhat competitive. But when it comes to Brian Robinson, I think it's an easy fade for me. I don't think I'll have, if any, exposure to him. I might have some lineups where I go Gibson and Robinson, because I do feel like if they do shut down the passing, then they're going to have to go to the ground. And if the points are going to come from the ground, it's going to be those 2 guys. But other than that, I'm going to keep it simple. But I think the Miles Sanders fade tonight is very interesting. And maybe this is one theory, out of the few that I like to kind of present that, we stick to tonight. So I think Miles Sanders fade night could be the way.
JD McKissick is out, so there's 1 fewer running back for Ron Rivera to get involved there, Megan. We'll go back to you to talk about these receivers And specifically on the Commanders side, you've got Curtis Samuel in there, Dotson projected to be lower owned, Terry McLaurin, surprisingly, in my mind, projected to be the second highest owned receiver on the slate after A.J. Brown. Where are you looking to focus your ownership on at the wide receiver slot?
Sure. And I want to say one other thing about, I do believe that Washington will have 3 running backs active. I think Jonathan Williams. So if you say, who is this guy? He's probably just going to get a couple of snaps. So I don't see him, getting into, any of Gibson's workload and to Chris's point, I think if, again, it's a Philly, playing from ahead, then Robinson becomes irrelevant and Gibson. So that is just one other point. There will be a third guy. It's just not somebody who's probably going to be very involved. As far as the receivers, listen, this breaks my heart because McLaurin is my favorite player in the NFL. I love him, but he's going to be hard to play tonight with the Slay matchup. So Philly is down their slot corner, I believe, and has a backup slot corner. Our producer Simon and I were talking about it before pre-show. So that might be an advantage for Curtis Samuel. Dotson does get a lot of, in the few games that he played, he was getting some red zone looks, and he's just a very efficient route runner. And then he's not a receiver, he's a tight end, but I think we could get Logan Thomas back. And this is my cheaper, low owned. I don't know if he's going to be contrarian or not because he is a good value, but I'm going to have a lot of Logan Thomas tonight. I'm betting his anytime touchdown. I think it was like plus 14, 14 to 1 or something like that. But anyways, Logan Thomas is my cheap Washington receiver. He's 6'6", good red zone target. And one more quote from John Keim, tight end coach Juan Castillo said, he's excited about Logan Thomas, has progressed from coming back from his knee injury. He's a back. And I'm excited for Monday night, Castillo said. So just quoting the tight end coach from the beat reporter. And, I don't know, take that for what it's worth, but I like Logan Thomas tonight as a cheap Washington receiver.
Logan Thomas for the Commanders. Philly yielding an average of 8 fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Washington, interestingly enough, yielding only 5, an average of 5 fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Of course, not every tight end is Dallas Goedert, Big T. Eli Mitchell is in the chat. Eli, great game last night. Absolutely great game last night. It was a surprise to a lot of people, but not me. It was not a surprise to me that you saw more carries than Christian McCaffrey, because that is what Kyle Shanahan excels at. Big T, tight ends, your thoughts, any changes to your opinion about Antonio Gibson based on C-Dome's electric breakdown?
No, I don't disagree with C-Dome too, because they got to dump it off, and you just have to have pieces. If you're building a couple teams, it's different. If you're building 20 or 150, like a lot of us do, you're going to need to include more options and more plans, like we always talk about. Maybe you got a script where they blow them out, maybe a close game script, all the different stuff to give you different paths. So, I don't disagree with his points. I hate the other guy, so I'm not going to play him. It is interesting, though, just diving into kind of the tight end. I thought for sure I was going to want to play Goddard, and it's just why I like doing these shows, because sometimes you realize stuff. And, yeah, Washington's number 1 in football against the tight end position from what I'm seeing. They look very strong. First game of the year, Goddard had 3 for 26. He scored a touchdown. What's that, 5, 11, 12 fantasy points or something like that? That's fine, but he got a touchdown in that game. Could be an interesting fade spot on some teams to get it, because I thought for sure I was going to play him. I just knew I liked him. But as you dive into the matchups, I don't know. It looked interesting. And another thing, I like we talked about, we were worried about the matchup for McLaurin. First matchup, he goes 6 for 102, though. That's decent numbers with everyone kind of scared of that, man. I wonder, was all their guys healthy in that game? That's another thing you never know. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Their defensive guys. I can't see if Slay played that game.
I believe he did.
Yeah, actually, I see him in there. So he was in there. I don't know. Again, just sometimes I react less to one-on-one matchups on D than other people, just because you don't know like the coverages too without looking. Maybe they rolled someone over, because I'd always choose the one-on-one over anything, no matter who the defender is. If they're going to play any of the stud receivers one-on-one, I'm always going to go with it. Whereas the Jamar Chase, which I seen as a Bengals fan, when they go roll the guy over, I hate that. I don't want the rollover, D. Give me the one-on-one versus anybody. the two-man soft zone, though, just brutalizes these guys. So I don't know. I'm not totally against McLaurin, but I like those points. I still like Curtis Samuel too, a decent amount. The first game he got 7 for 48. Just kind of looking through these numbers because I think this score in the game, it was 24-8 the first time. They scored 24 in the second, no points in the second half. They kind of sat on it. I kind of see the game going similar to the first game, honestly, where I think the totals, what's the total tonight, JT? In the 50s, right?
43 and a half.
Oh, it's that low. I thought someone in the chat said 51 or something. I hadn't looked at it.
These second division games, particularly in the NFC East over the last several years, have just been ugly affairs. You remember a lot of the Dallas Eagles games have been on Sunday Night Football, these Washington Giants games. Sometimes they do surprise. Occasionally they do surprise. Maybe Philadelphia's had a little bit too much rest. You never know. Eli Mitchell in chat bringing a lot of good nuggets here. He says Slay did say a couple years ago that Scary Terry was one of the toughest receivers to defend. So Slay maybe
could just be a matchup thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes they just maybe it's the size, maybe it's just how they do it. They go up and get the ball. You never know. It's like we always talk about in baseball, and I never liked when people say they don't pay attention to matchups. There's always a pitcher that owns you. Like, I know when I go to the plate, I'm going to own C-Dome. Like, that's just in my head. I know the matchup's in my favor. I know I'm taking him yard when he pitches to me. I just know that. That's how BVP works. Could be how McLaurin is with Slay. Maybe he just knows he's got that advantage.
McLaurin got 13 hours of sleep last night. He's excited for tonight. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
He's ready to rock. He's ready to kick ass.
I will say, I mean, aside from Big T, I would strike you out. It's not even funny. You would be so slow at the plate. It's just disgusting. but Terry McLaurin, you know, in his career with Heineke, 86 catches, 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns, basically an entire season as far as from a statistical standpoint. And you can see the difference in kind of what he's done the last 3 games compared to with Wentz earlier on the season. Heineke loves this guy. He's going to pepper him with targets. There's no doubt. So it does come down to what we talked about, the matchup. Now, last time, you know, nine targets, 102 yards, didn't get in the box, but still, I mean, 19 fantasy points. Was that all against Slay? I'm not too sure. I don't know the whole entire matchup. But tonight, if we're worried about the matchup, then, you know, you fade him. But I will say it is interesting with Big T talking about Heineke, and if he gets his 15 points and McLaurin's his guy, and, you know, now we have to, okay, well, how do we fill out the other 4 roster spots? I think it's just an interesting scenario. If you truly believe that Washington keeps it close, I think McLaurin is someone that, okay, you know, maybe there is a lot of upside here. And if he does win this matchup against Slay, then we can talk about maybe putting McLaurin in the captain as well. And this is just from a game theory standpoint. So I don't know. I think it's very interesting, but there's a lot of upside with McLaurin because he's actually really a stud.
If you're listening and you're making notes about what kind of lineup these guys are building, I mean, I can see it now, just the way you guys are talking, right? McLaurin captain, Heineke, Gibson, Logan Thomas, AJ Brown, and Hurts. I have no idea if it's possible to build.
It actually does sound like a good build.
I think that sounds good.
I don't think it'll fit, but if it
I have no idea if it fits, right? That's the big challenge. Tyler, from the bet side, runpurebets.com. Go ahead and check it out if you are or are not a member. And regardless of whether you're a member or not, 739 watching, 258 likes. This has to end. This is like, you remember last week, all the people talking about Jeff Saturday and disrespect. This is disrespectful. 258 likes. By the way, when we get to 500, I stop talking about the likes. So let's go hit it up. Let's see if we can get to our slowest 500 ever, the opposite of what Tambo likes to get. But Megan, I'll bring it over to you to fill this out. Tyler was asking, would you rather play Jake Elliott or Kenneth Gainwell? I don't know the answer because Big T seems to like Gainwell a little bit. Some of these other spots, these guys that are going to get 2 to 5% ownership, the Quez Watkins, Zach Pascal, Cam Sims. I don't have any interest in any of those guys, but the kickers and the defense is interesting here. Of course, Philadelphia priced up at 6.4. They did get, I think, 15 DraftKings points in that first matchup. That was with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz had been much more of a statue than Heineke has been. They are both similarly turnover prone, but where do you stand on kickers and defenses. We'll run that around, then we'll go through our captains, and then we'll get out of here. So you got about 15 minutes to get us to 500 likes and not rely on the After Hours crew.
Yeah, as far as Gainwell versus the kicker, you can make a case for either. It really is just, Gainwell got there last week, but I do think I'll make a case for the Washington defense has been playing much better of late. So maybe, Eagles are moving the ball and they stall out, and Elliott, gets, 3 or 4 field goals. So I actually would lean the kicker in that one. I don't know the weather tonight. I assume it's fine in Philly. So as far as kickers and defenses, I like the Philly kicker much better than the Washington kicker. If you look at Sly's game log, I don't know. I just would prefer the Philly kicker, and same with the Philly defense. If you were to play one, again, it's all kind of the game or the as we talk about lineup construction, I think a Philly defense makes a lot of sense in more like an onslaught type situation since they're so expensive. But of course they're in play while Heineke can scramble and maybe avoid some sacks. He is, he's a gunslinger and he is turnover prone. So, but that's a hefty price to pay. So I think it's kind of, again, the script you're kind of talking about that you're building.
Mid 40s and clear in Philadelphia tonight. For those of you wondering, thanks to Dark Sky, which is not our partner yet. Seedome, kickers, defenses. Any interest in Joey Sly? Any interest in the Commanders defense? I know you were talking in Discord earlier about, like we always talk about on these shows, the contrarian builds, one that would have Jalen Hurts captain with the Commanders defense, something that has worked here on a couple of slates.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to talk about wide receivers, so I just want to say one thing real quick.
My apologies. Please talk about
No. It's all good. De'Ami Brown, Pascal, Quez Watkins, these guys, especially like De'Ami Brown, they should be in the $100 range. I mean, maybe we can give some slack to Quez Watkins, but as far as the Washington side with Dotson back, we might not see the other guys on the field. They might just not even get any run potentially. And if they do, it's probably a couple snaps. For me, that's an easy fade. I think Big T brought up last time, with the Ravens, right? We know what's going to happen because we know who's going to be on the field. So why not just eliminate players that are just not worth our time when it comes to being optimal and also lineup construction? It also saves us time for not wasting any lineups as well, which gives us more kind of variance to put in the guys that we truly want and get different combinations that we need. So for me, these lower price guys, it's just kind of an easy fade for me tonight. I just don't see these guys playing a big role. But I do like the fact that Megan brought up the injury in the slot when it comes to Curtis Samuel. He also is a guy that, can run the ball and also get end arounds and get carries and things of that nature. So, the more we kind of talk, the more having a game theory perspective of wideouts and Heineke does make a lot of sense. Now, the question you got to ask yourself is, do I want to put someone like that in the captain, which Curtis Samuel does bring a lot of leverage, believe it or not. And you're just hoping that if he does have this mismatch and you say, okay, McLaurin, he's going to be locked down by Slate. Let me go to where the weak matchup is, which is what we like to do as well in attack. You're getting a lot of leverage there. You can also fit a little bit more firepower with a Hurts and a Brown, or Hurts, Brown, Goddard, or things of that nature, and maybe run it back with Logan Thomas. I think the Logan Thomas call is pretty good. He's going to see sub 20% ownership. And who knows if that's even lower than that. But, Thomas is a guy, and people will look at the recency bias. He didn't do anything last game, right? But you got to look at kind of what's happened, throughout his career with Heineke. And, he's caught 3 or 4 touchdowns in 9 games with him. Mm-hmm. He's caught over 20 something passes. So, he averages 13 yards a catch with Heineke. And this is only in 8 or 9 games. So the sample size is small, but we have to remember too, Logan Thomas is a freak of nature. He was a quarterback at Virginia Tech. He has some speed. He's got height. He's a big dude. If there's one time where maybe we can say, okay, who's a cheap guy? I think Logan Thomas might be the best cheap guy. Kickers, real quick, could be actually easy fade tonight, even though Elliott keeps popping up in optimal lineups, which I hate solely based on the fact that he doesn't give a lot of opportunity to kick field goals. He doesn't kick field goals. He has 8 attempts on the year. He's averaging 1 field goal a game. And even in his last 2, he's only kicked 1 field goal. So it's not like, other kickers that we've seen where the volume is there to give us upside. So we can't really, say like how optimal can Jake Elliott be? If they're going to drive down the field, I hardly believe Washington's going to stop them in the red zone. Like they're just going to score, because that just tells me that the offense is moving. So with that said, I mean, and if we don't think Washington can score much, but they're going to, obviously have to throw Sly, I don't know. So the kickers are also something interesting as well, because I just don't know if the volume will be there for us essentially for that. So that's kind of like my take.
Mark Borneman is in chat saying there's rain tonight in Philly. Mark, there is a 0% chance in Philadelphia. You donkey, get out. But before you get out, hit the like button. Big T, kickers, defenses, and captains. And then once we do the captains for everyone, we'll make some bold calls and get out of here.
Yeah. So one thing I always talk about with these skill players, and anyone that's watched these shows all year knows how much I like kickers and defenses in Showdown. But I'm with my man C-Dome tonight. I think this is a game log position, and people might not agree with that, but I'm fine having my own beliefs with this stuff. You click Jake Elliott. I would always like the kicker from a team that I think is going to win, but you click on him. The dude's highest game all year. They're 9-0 or 8-0. I don't know if they had their bye week yet. His highest game of the year is 10 points. Again, that's the number in Showdown you want to set your sights on, even for the cheap guys. I want 10 plus points. His highest game of the year is 10 points, and the guy's going to be 30% owned tonight, 35%. I think that's a pretty reasonable fade there. So let's go to the other side. You go to, where's he at? Joey Sly. He has an 11-point game. It's his biggest game of the year. So both kickers, highest game of the year is what we need. Sure, if you I don't even know. I honestly don't know if I would play them. If you guaranteed me 10 or 11, but no higher, I probably would, just because I like the security and I think I can get different elsewhere. But that's the highest they've gotten all season. So I think we can be somewhat different by fading the kickers. And I never say that ever. This might be the first time in a Showdown show I've ever said it. I just don't like it that much. So let's go to I thought I'd like the Commanders D. I feel like they've been pretty good off the top of my head. I clicked them. They've got one double-digit game too at 13 points. I like Philly anyway. So why am I playing the Commanders defense? I think I can fade them too. So that eliminates 3 of the 4. Now, Philly's D, I'm going to have a little bit harder time. For one, I just think they're really good, like maybe the best defense in football. I think Heineke takes sacks the way he plays. He likes to take chances, those picks. So naturally, all that points to a good Eagles performance on D. And then let's go to the game logs like I just talked about. They're a little more expensive, but you got 4 double-digit games, 18, 15, 14, and 12. So 4 of those games, in my mind, in a game like tonight, would be probably close to the optimal build with that price range. It's just good scores. Even their bad scores, their worst game of the year, they had 5 versus Detroit, which was week 1 in Detroit. They had 4 in Arizona. They had 8 in Houston. So 3 of their 4 single digits were on the road. They weren't at home. You got primetime division game. The crowd's going to be hopping. I am definitely on the Eagles defense, but I think I never say this, but I think we can fade the other 3 sides of the kickers, and that's a decent amount of ownership. So I actually feel like usually you would feel like that's not that aggressive of a take. I actually do tonight think that's a very aggressive take, and I'm pretty on board with it. One more note too, as we were going through, it looked like my college football hero, Jared Patterson, got activated for tonight. So I actually think he will be the number 3 back from Washington. I think we'll have to check, but he's only 200, which brings us back to that range where if you think it's a blowout, I mean, he could get some work. You just never know in a blowout. And he's so cheap that you could take a chance on him if he was activated. I think I saw he was getting activated. So pay attention to that. Be in the Run Pure Discord. I'm sure we'll have all that info as it gets closer to lock. And one more note about the receivers, because I was digging in while these guys were talking. So from watching the Houston game and the game before that, which I think was Pittsburgh, Pascal actually stuck out to me. You're not going to see this in the stat line. Like when you click on him, his stats are not going to show it. Last week he had 1 target, 8 yards. The week before, 2 for 57 and a touchdown. He probably didn't even play. I mean, you guys got the snap numbers. I don't have them up. He probably didn't play that many snaps, but strictly eyeball test, I feel like they liked him, and I feel like they were getting him some looks. And the dude is 1,400. So if we're not playing those kickers and Ds, in my head, I want to go cheaper, go more stars and scrubs tonight. And a guy like Zach Pascal fits that build, especially with Jalen Hurts captain type builds, which is, I mean, let's just face it. If I can play anything tonight, obviously I would play Hurts captain if I can get different, just because it gives me security and upside. So I think Zach Pascal will be 3 to 5% owned tonight, 1,400. And he checks every box, basically, what I'm wanting to say. It lets me play the guys I want. It gives me salary relief. It gets me different. And I actually like it just straight from the eyeball test. So I think Zach Pascal might be my favorite sneaky play of the night.
You mentioned the game in Philadelphia. Obviously, those Philly fans are going to be wanting to take a body with them as they leave the stadium.
Maybe they should bring our boy Spread a stare to the facility.
Well, that might be inviting a little bit. It's like inviting sand to the beach, right? I mean, bringing the murderer into the murderer's den. But Big T, captains, favorite captains. We've been talking about Hurts, maybe making some of these cheaper guys a captain. Where you're leaning on the captain position right now, knowing that your entire player pool and cores are going to be up at runpuresports.com later tonight.
Yep. After I have a chance to build, I'll have more of a clear direction. But from right now, super cut and dry. I'm not going to have any Washington captains. Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae, Goddard. That's where I want to be. Those guys. I could even make a case for. I talked up Eagles D hard. I don't usually do that, and I don't know if you need – this is why I got to build before I put it up on the Run Pure site. But I could make a case for Eagles D tonight if it was the right build and it made sense to me, because I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game tonight. I like Philly, but I don't think it's going to be some 38-20 game or something. So I could make a case for the D being in there tonight. So I guess that would be, what, four captains, 5 captains? That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Dome, captains, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the Pascal call is a little interesting because he is very cheap and the volume is there as far as snap counts.
You got the snap counts? How many did he play last 2 weeks?
He played 31% last week, 20 snap counts. The week before, 43%.
That's higher than I thought you were going to say, honestly. Just eyeball test, he looks good to me.
Yeah, so, and what's interesting is because Quez Watkins played 54% and 70%, but I feel like in that Houston game, Quez was always just blocking on some of those runs. And so he wasn't really running as many routes as I thought he would potentially be doing. But yeah, I mean, at 1,400 and you got a guy that's on the field at least 30% of the time, all it takes is that one, right? And that one can put you ahead of a significant amount of the field. So if he's going to be sub 3-4%, it's probably worth noting to have some shares or at least sprinkle in some Zach Pascal, just solely based on the fact that he is a guy that will be on the field, at some point throughout the game and a decent amount for that price point. But for me, captain, I think right now from where I stand, I think I talked about it before. I think Goddard for me is someone I really want to focus on at captain. I think obviously some Hurts, that's a no-brainer. And then, I think I do want some Smith and some Brown. I don't mind that. I think the Eagles D is very interesting at captain. I hate the fact that Jake Elliott keeps popping up, solely based on, the leverage. But for me, I just don't know if the kickers are somewhere I can go in captain tonight based on the limited volume throughout the season. And then on the Washington side, if you really want to get different, I think Gibson and Curtis Samuel and McLaurin are very interesting. And I think that there's no wrong or right way to put them into the lineup tonight if you think that there will be fantasy production from those three and Heineke as well. So obviously too, a lot of these guys are kind of expensive for Philly. So if you want to fit them, how do I fit them, but yet still, be able to have them in the same lineup? You're going to have to get a little bit different. And that could garner a Washington player in the captain, which will already be different because a lot of people are going to go on the Philadelphia side. So Yeah, I think, what you need to do tonight is probably look at it from a few different lenses in regards to the game theory and in regards to, what truly can make you different essentially. But as far as the number one guy, at least for me right now, based on from what I'm seeing, price point, projection, leverage, it's probably going to be Dallas Goedert. And I think Antonio Gibson, believe it or not, makes a fair case, especially if they get down early. If they get down early, he'll get a ton of targets. He's going to be involved heavily in the offense. B-Rob will completely be irrelevant at that point, and the checkdowns are going to go to him. And at that point, it's like, man, how many people are really going to put him in the captain spot, right? What, maybe 5-6%? So that alone right there is significantly different. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm looking at in regards to and to captain, essentially, from an initial lens standpoint.
Gibson projected captain ownership right at 7%. So very close to what you're thinking there, C-Dome. Megan, captains.
Well, I think these guys have covered the captains very well. And so I'll be your Washington girl. And believe me, I'm building game scripts, different game scripts. And that'll depend who my captain is. So I will have plenty of the Philly captain, exposure to the Philly captains that these guys covered very well. So I'll be your Washington girl. I'll cover some of the Washington captains. I mean, Chris covered them, but the ones I'm considering are, and again, this is going to be very contrarian, but these are takes that you think Washington keeps it close. If you think AP is right and Washington, get the Washington money line, this is where you're building that, and not many people are going to do it. So I would consider Heineke captain, Gibson captain, Samuel, and I said McLaurin has a tough matchup. But again, if you're building a script where Washington does somehow compete, then I like McLaurin. And I have one other, the really wild card. I built a Logan Thomas captain. I'm almost embarrassed to admit it, but I built it and I got everything I wanted, and nobody's going to own it. What if he gets 2 touchdowns? It's like that Jawan Johnson, one from a couple of weeks ago. So I have 5 Washington captains that I gave you, and probably that's not the optimal way to go, but it's certainly the contrarian way to go. So
if he gets 2 touchdowns,
I will say
we'll be giving tickets out on tomorrow.
Exactly. I will.
Well,
no, I was gonna say, if she's not wrong about Thomas, because if you look at some of the box scores and kind of what tight ends have done, Hawkinson almost scored 10 points, Irv Smith scored over 10 points, Ferguson from Dallas scored over 10 points, Freiermuth scored over 10 points, Hurts scored over 10 points. So maybe there's some correlation there in regards to, if other areas are getting shut down and they get to the red zone, then yeah, Logan Thomas, I mean, he's a big ass dude. Like, it's going to be hard not to want to target. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be hard wanting to target him. So I think from a cheap standpoint as well, and I hope that the ownership comes in much lower than what's being projected, solely based on the fact of recency bias, and he hasn't done anything the last few games. And so if people see that, they might just say, okay, I'm going to go elsewhere. Then that gives us even more opportunities. So yeah, I think, for me, Logan Thomas is also somewhat interesting as well from a cheap play.
How many snaps has he been playing?
I don't have the snap count, but I think they've been working him up because he came back from injury. So that whole quote from the tight ends coach is, now he's healthy and, look out for Monday night. I mean, again, let's see what the snaps are tonight, but I think they've been ramping him up. I don't know the snap count.
Well, while he looks it up, I got one more comment, just because I always say this.
72%, Big T, 72%.
Yeah, I like that call then a lot.
Okay.
Well, one comment though I always talk about in NBA as the season gets going, because NBA is all projection based, and now everyone uses optimizers. So this is all it's about, unless you know how to tinker with it. But just say, for example, in NBA, you'll have a guy projected for like 40, and he hasn't hit 40. You look at his box scores. Again, I'm not saying chase the box scores, but you'll pull it up, and I always talk about this. He'll have like 10 straight games, like 35, 36, 38, 33, 39, but nothing over 40. Yet he'll be projected for 40 at the same spot. I just have never understood it. Tonight with these optimizers, again, back to the kicker fade, but you're going to see Elliott projected 8, 9, 7, all these numbers, and he's going to hit because of that in your optimizers if you leave him in there and don't change anything. But then you look at his, like I said already, the dude only has 1 game above his projection. And I know it's only been 9 or 10 weeks, because all the guys that are smarter than me will be, it's a small sample. Still, though, if the dude, I don't understand how you can project a guy ahead of what he's done the entire year. I just don't get that as a guy that doesn't understand it enough. So I just think that's an even better fade. I mean, I love the kicker fades.
Logan Thomas, big ass dude, 2.6K on DraftKings. Ownership projected at 15%. Captain ownership, though, not on the map, really, in terms of where
It's
people
Megan,
think
Megan, and
could be.
whoever else wants to join me.
That could be a good thing. It could be a very good thing. I think you're absolutely right, Megan. The lineup you can build with him gets you away from some of these cheaper, more speculative plays. So especially in higher dollar, smaller field, very interesting thing there. Megan, bold call for this game. You go first.
I'm going to say that Washington keeps it close. I'm not going to go. I mean, I always bet the Washington money line just for fun, just to sprinkle.
Get in there. Say you're taking them to win outright.
Oh, I bet it. I bet it already. I bet it
Yeah.
already. I bet it, but I bet it every week though. So I don't know if you want to take that as a stand, but yeah. So I bet the Washington money line. I'm going to have some fun with that. I bet the Logan Thomas anytime touchdown. And I think my bold call is pretty clear that I'm going to have a way over the field on Logan Thomas tonight. That's my bold call. And yeah, I like Washington to make this interesting tonight.
Way over the field on Logan Thomas.
That's right.
She's locking him in. That's what you heard. C-Dome, bold call.
Yeah, I think, been kind of spot on with these as of late. I'm fading Miles Sanders. I don't know completely, but I think I'm going to be very limited on exposure. I think tonight is not the night, especially to pay almost 10K for him. I just don't think for me that's kind of the direction I want to go. And I think also too, Gibson will be on the optimal lineup. And I think the linebackers being out for Washington is going to even open up the middle even more. I know people are thinking that they can't do anything as far as the tight end against them. I think tonight is the Dallas Goedert night, and I love the other tight end as well. So I think tonight could be possibly you have both quarterbacks, you have both tight ends, and then you try to figure out how you want to piece the other two in regards to stacking. So just gave you a little bit of a little sneak peek there of maybe a potential optimal lineup. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going.
All right, tight end season, Big T, bold call on this game.
Yeah, so my favorite guy off the wall that I talked about is Pascal. I like what he's doing. He's on the field more than I thought. Like when C-Dome told me the number, I thought he was going to say like 10%, 15%. Because I know he doesn't play a ton, but at that price point, playing 30%, I just liked what I saw last week, and I regretted not having any. So I'm going to be on him heavy, and off of the kickers and Washington D are kind of my more aggressive takes.
Mr. Patrick Rice, happy Monday to you as well. Randon has already posted his entire player pool in Discord. If you're a member, go ahead, get in there, check it out. If you're not a member, go ahead and sign up. Take advantage of the bets promo and use our partner Saber Sim. Big T's cores and everybody's cores going to be up closer to lock. I'm not going to give an actual time, but they'll be up closer to lock, as well as will his whole player pool. That's it for this edition of the
Mark. How many times are you going to say Pascal's a blocker before I got to ruin JT's intro? The dude just keeps saying it. He just keeps screaming, and Pascal's a blocker. No shit. He's 1,400. He's not Jerry Rice out there for 1,400. We only need one play, buddy.
Mark also thinks it's rainy in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Mark.
So,
and he also thinks you're not allowed to smoke weed in the year 2022. Come on, Mark.
But everybody's doing it. Well, good luck to you, Mark. For Megan Schaup, for Chris Randone, and of course, Big T, Tony Niehaus. Simon, get us out of here, please.